Welcome, everybody, inside the coach's office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, alongside my co host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, man, quite the special show we got today. We got two special guests lined up. And before we introduce our first guest, man, I want to see how you're doing. I know you were a little under the weather this week. How you feeling?
It's been brutal, right? This time of year in Michigan, just fighting a little stomach bug for a couple days, and I'm a big baby. But this made me happy this morning, knowing I was going to wake up and talk some baseball with a great guy who we follow on social media and puts out some great content. So fired up to talk some Tiger baseball today.
Yeah, I got to point out, you being a baby, you're practically wearing a coat doing a podcast. So
fair enough. Yeah.
Coaching with you for 20 years, I know how much you hate the cold. So
brutal.
But let's go ahead and get into it. Let's bring on our first guest from Just Baseball. It is writer Clay Snowden. Clay, thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate the invite, guys. It's always fun to talk Tigers baseball, especially once we've had a few months off and trying to dive back into it. And, the roster construction atmosphere of the offseason is always a fun discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, cold days like this, man, it makes me longing for the summer nights at Comerica Park, man, 75, 80-degree days. And so a chance to talk some baseball here in mid-December is always great. But let's go ahead and get right into it. The big story and this cloud that's been hanging over the Tigers for really the last year has been, what are they going to do with Tarik Skubal? Back-to-back Cy Young Award winner, widely regarded as the best pitcher in baseball, the face of the franchise for the Detroit Tigers. But 2026 is the last year he has under contract with the Detroit Tigers. And a lot of rumors have been going on. A lot of people have their opinions on what they should do, what they will do. President of Operations Scott Harris kind of keeps his cards close to his vest on what they're going to do in the future. But Clay, what have you been hearing? A lot of rumors going around this over the winter meetings. What are you hearing on the latest with Tarik Skubal?
Yeah, there's all kinds of, words and names being tossed around about the Skubal scenario. And for me personally, it really comes down to what can the Tigers do in free agency between now and the time they would, quote unquote, have to trade him. So let's just say hypothetically that they get an Alex Bregman or another, impact bat like a Bo Bichette or whatever it may be, or a trade that lands somebody of similar caliber. At that point, you are a World Series contending team. In my opinion, if that happens, you have to keep Tarik Skubal. You don't trade the best player in baseball. I know it sounds, oh, well, they can't re-sign him. They won't re-sign him. And I think that that's true. I do not think that they will re-sign him. But that doesn't mean that you have to trade him necessarily. You can still get a comp pick for him once you give him the qualifying offer, similar scenario to Gleyber Torres this offseason. And I know that that's getting pennies on the dollar. But at the end of the day, like if you have a chance to win the World Series, you have to take that. And if you get a comp pick, so be it. It's better than nothing. But I'm not exactly in this scenario where I think the best case scenario is to trade him, move all these different pieces, lessen the rotation in a big way, and also just the message that it sends to the team. Hey, we just traded the best player in baseball, or at least the best pitcher in baseball. Guys, go out there and win the World Series still. Like, for me, that's difficult. Now, if you can't land an impact bat, and it does look like, oh gosh, I don't know. Like, the return would have to make a lot of sense. And we just don't typically see the returns match the value for these 1-year rentals. We saw with Corbin Burns was a decent return, but not nearly what you would expect. I think Skubal's better than that. And when it comes down to the teams that need him, that will pay up for him and have the prospect capital to make the trade, there's only a couple teams in mind.
If the Tigers were to make this trade, what do you think they would possibly get back? You mentioned the Burns trade where, Milwaukee didn't quite get back what would be expected, but, Skubal's maybe a level above that. What are some names or at least some level of prospects of what a trade would look like, what the Tigers could possibly get back?
Yeah, I don't think you're getting like the top prospect in a system. And I know that that's hard to hear, but history just tells us that a lot of times you don't get that level of player. So I could see Scott Harris wanting to go a little bit of quantity here. I'm not saying just give me 7 mediocre prospects and we'll call it a deal. But if you get that second, third, fourth prospect mixed in with some others. And I know that the Dodgers are the team that's been rumored to most recently, and they do have a number of young, controllable arms. But those young, controllable arms also come with a little bit of experience in the majors, guys who could slot into the rotation immediately. You know, you have guys like River Ryan, who somehow is still a top 100 prospect, even though he's 27 years old. He's just missed so much time with injury. Another name there is Jackson Ferris, who's a lefty. I believe he's probably about the fifth or sixth best prospect in the Dodgers system. A very good system, by the way. And they also have that unique combination where you could put a Bobby Miller, a former top prospect who's fallen out of favors, has had injuries. Like they have the perfect mixture of high-end young talent, guys who could slot into the rotation immediately, and a little bit of those pipe dream type. It just speaks volumes to how good the Dodgers are as an organization in drafting, developing. So for me, that's the landing spot to me that I think is most likely, although the Mets have been reeling a little bit. You know, this offseason they've missed out on player A and B, and it kind of feels like they need to make a splash move of some kind. We know that they're interested in Skubal. Jonathan would probably be the top player there, a young pitcher who's just an awesome person, by the way. Like, if you've never watched an interview of him, he's so fascinating to just listen to. I think that McLean's their top arm. I don't think that you quite get him. I think that he's untouchable. But if you can stack a few other prospects, those are the two deals that I think make the most sense, where the return includes players who could help you now and help bridge that gap into the future, where Skubal would be gone. Mize is a free agent after this upcoming season. Jack Flaherty's a free agent after this upcoming season. You're going to need rotation help, not only this year. I still think that they need rotation help this year, but into the future.
Yeah. You mentioned like a lot of guys that are on 1-year contracts, and it feels like the Tigers could go one or two ways. That they could try to go all in on this season with 2026 and try to win it all, you know, with all these 1-year guys, Skubal being included in that. Or they could feel, and Brian and I have talked a lot about this, about how we wonder how much Scott Harris believes in this current core that's at the major league level. Because a lot of those guys aren't his guys. Those a lot are level guys. A lot of guys that he did not draft. The guys that he drafted are all the top prospects in the farm system, the number one farm system in baseball. You know, the Max Clarks, the McGonagalls, the Bersinos, the Lorenzo's, all those guys. Those are his guys. So we wonder, like, does he feel that this is a team that can win it all and go win the World Series? And would he be willing to try to go all in to try to win it this year? Or is he thinking and has been thinking that, hey, my team is 27, 28, 29, 30. Like, that's my core group. That's the group that's going to win it down the road. And if that's the case, and that's what he believes, don't you think that maybe he probably should trade Skubal?
Yeah, and that's where you have to think about who's making these calls. Now, obviously, a deal like Skubal is not a Scott Harris only decision. That's an ownership decision. That's everybody involved in operations there is in on that decision. That's a franchise altering choice. But look at what Scott Harris has done. Where has he taken risk? The only risk he's taken is maybe paying a little bit more money to convince someone on a 1-year deal. Jack Flaherty, when he originally signed him, they gave him a little bit of, 15 million, but 1-year deals. He's really gravitated towards short-term commitments, and I think he's pretty risk adverse. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Probably where the Tigers have been the past couple of years, it was probably more on the good side than the bad side, but they're transitioning now. They're transitioning into a team that's more serious of a contender, and it's time to dial up that risk a little bit. I'm not saying you have to trade everyone, do everything, but we're going to learn a lot about Scott Harris this offseason. If it's another 1-year deal, older guys trying to convince people to just, take a little bit more money, but give us the commitment being on our side. I think if it boils down to it, like, is he going to be so risk adverse that he's so worried about losing Skubal that he may kind of at some point say, okay, I just got to trade him. Like, I got to trade him, damn the 2026 aspirations of World Series or whatever it may be. And that's the biggest worry for me is he is not a risk taker from what we have seen so far. He can change that because I do think this team has a different level of expectation. 24 was lucky. We all know it. That team was not very good. Like, they were fine. They weren't as good as their record showed. 25 was kind of that first step of, all right, let's prove it. Prove to us that you are serious about being a good team. And although they faltered down the stretch, I think that they earned it. Like, if I'm in that clubhouse, I think those players earned the right for the front office to invest, take a couple of risks, and try to win in 2026. I don't think it has to be an all-in approach. I don't think it will be an all-in approach, because that's where you can really ruin what you've been building the past 2 to 3 years under Scott Harris.
Clay, to that point with the taking the risk, like I think in a way they kind of have to. When you look at their roster, there's still like so many questions about who's playing where, right? Like, is Colt Keith going to be the everyday third baseman? Like, right? What are they going to do with Parker Meadows, Zach McKinstry, Kerry Carpenter? Is he still your platoon? Right fielder, right? So there's still, I think, a lot of questions there, even like how the roster, like Dan and I have talked before, like we still think there's
think we frozen on my end from I can't hear you either, Dan.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, Clay. Yeah, I think Brian lost internet connection there, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, and I kind of got the gist of what you were saying. So until he cuts back in and corrects me on what he was saying, what I'll follow up is the risk does have to be taken, because I think a lot of players outperformed in 2025. Zach McKinstry, Javier Baez, even Dylan Dingler to an extent. Like, it's not that I dislike these players or don't think that they can be productive, but there were multiple points, pretty deep in the season where I remember looking at it and there were, I believe, 5 or 7 regular players who were having career years. So I'm piggybacking off what you were saying,
yeah,
and trying to kind of, because we lost you there.
yeah.
But I like what you're saying, because I was just recapping. There were 5 or 7 players that had massive career years, 15% above what was expected from them and what they've shown on the back of their baseball card. What if those guys take a step back?
Yeah.
What if those guys kind of come back down to their level? And that's where you have to add in order to protect against that. It's almost insurance, right? Okay, yeah, these players were really good. Zach McKinstry was awesome last year. Do we really think that's Zach McKinstry, or are we going to believe the 5 years prior that we have a sample size? Adding to kind of not only improve the team, but protect yourself from players who will likely regress or just kind of find their level again, which is fine. Maybe someone else comes up, we don't know. That's part of baseball. But I like what you're saying in terms of taking that risk, adding a player or 2, even a bat. Like, I think the lineup needs help as well. I think the rotation could still use an arm. I think the bullpen could use one more kind of certified piece. And then I think that you need to start talking about the lineup.
Well, and that's to Dan's point. He talked about with the Skubal stuff. Like, typically, like, if they're still playing for this year, the signal would be if you trade him, you could get an impact bat in return. But like, if it's still prospects, like is what it sounds like, that adds to our argument that, like, okay, maybe it is a year or 2 down the road where Scott Harris and they think like that's the championship core.
Yeah, and there is a scenario where you trade Skubal. The return includes 2 players who help your roster today. I'm not saying 2 players who are high impact, but younger players you could insert and at least be comfortable with being on the team. You know what I mean? Like, guys who can fill in at least and give you some level of production. If that's the scenario, then you go out and you sign an impact bat. Let's just say Bregman, or trade for, whatever it is. You also add. So you trade and add. That's where things get really interesting. The reason why that sounds great in theory, it's very difficult to pull off. And there's a reason we don't see it happen that often, because a lot of things have to go in your favor, and it's a high-risk move. You trade off your best player. Here's some players that are less proven, Let's hope that they all work. Oh, yeah, by the way, we're also going to sign this guy. Well, what if that guy, the Diamondbacks come in at the last minute and sweep a better offer? Now your plan is crumbling. You know what I mean? So it welcomes a lot of risk. It can happen, and it can still make the Tigers a World Series contender without Skubal. But the percentage of all of that working in your favor is, 5, 10%. It's very, very low.
Sure.
I think another aspect of this too, of going out and signing a big name and adding a bat to this lineup, is the general sentiment around the fan base. And I know you can't run your organization in that way about how the fan base believes in you, but I was at the second game of the home playoff game, game 4 against Seattle, and it wasn't sold out. I know a lot had to do that. It was a day game during the week, but man, being in Detroit sports as long as I have, like, it's a playoff game in the second round, like, they're never not sold out, man. That was the first time that Detroit Tiger playoff game wasn't sold out. And I think a lot of it was just fans just don't have a general belief in this team that they can win it all, which to me is crazy. Like, they're in the second round of the playoffs for the second year in a row. Like, man, I didn't really understand it, but man, it just, like, you go back to it, like, this fan base was used to what it was with Mike Ilitch and all the stars. And you just look at the lineup with Cabrera and Victor Martinez and Prince Fielder and Magliardonias. It was just star after star after star after star. And even with pitching staff with Verlander and Scherzer. I mean, it was just filled with stars. But this iteration, there are not a lot of household names. I mean, other than Skubal, not a lot of stars in this lineup. And when the lineup started to fail and they weren't scoring runs and they were losing games, that there was a lot of frustration within the fan base. And I think adding a bat like an Alex Bregman or Bichette would not only improve the team immensely, as we talked about, but I think it would bring a lot of faith within the fan base and a lot of excitement within the fan base, that from a business standpoint, let's admit it, Chris Ilitch runs this as a business. And I think that would help a lot with ticket sales and ratings and all the things that come with it.
Yeah, and I do think, I hear all the fans on Twitter and whatnot, and I would say that a lot of them are a little too instant gratification. I mean, if you think about 2 years ago, we really didn't think that this team had a chance. They sold at the deadline. They sold at the deadline less than 2 years ago, and they've been back-to-back playoff, round wins. Like, to me, it takes time. You had such a young roster. They're gaining experience. They are improving. And the best prospect in baseball, 1 or 2, depending on the list, just baseball, had him at 1, now he's at 2. Kevin McGonigal hasn't debuted. How about the other top 20 prospect in Max Clark? Like, there's more on the way, and there's still some pieces remaining that are kind of fringe players. I mean, let's be honest. Like, this doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't. And if you want to go out there and sign 5 big-name free agents and hope it works out, I can tell you right now that's not how most teams are built.
Yeah.
I did an article breaking down the past, I think it was like 8 years, 10 years of every large free agent contract and how many of those worked out. Very few. You'd be alarmed how many free agent contracts do not work out. I'm not saying you shouldn't do them. You like we said, you need to take a risk from time to time, but we're still pretty early in this new era of Tigers baseball. I'd say we're a year and a half in, really. I mean, we had Trey Sweeney starting at shortstop and Andy Ibanez on. You know what I mean? Like, it's gonna take time. We still have high-level prospects, and this isn't some like, oh yeah, I like this guy. He's the 4th best prospect in the system. Like, we're talking like top 20 prospects in all of baseball on the way. So to me, it's, do they have to make a splash move this year in order to save the fan base hopes? No, I don't think so. But it would help. It certainly would help. But for me, it's still like another step in their team life cycle. And we see this in sports. You rebuild, you come in, you're young, year or 2 years of kind of figuring out who's good, who's not, who's going to fit around, who's part of this nucleus. And then you start adding to it. And sometimes it may take 3-4 years after you start adding to it before you're consistently where you need to be. Think about the Mariners. I mean, who just beat the Tigers. They've kind of been in the same path, only a couple years more. And they're just now getting to where the Tigers could have easily been where they were this year, is my point. Sometimes it takes multiple years. And the Tigers still have time, I think. I don't think anyone needs to be fired. I don't think anything drastic needs to happen. That could change in a year. But for right now, I think that they're in a pretty good shape, even if they miss out. Because the offseason as a whole isn't sexy because we haven't landed all those players that people had on their list. But what did they do? They brought back Labor Torres, who was awesome.
Yeah.
His injury definitely slowed him down. He's going to be healthy. If he was a free agent and the Tigers signed him, people would be ecstatic about that.
Mhm.
They brought back Kyle Finnegan, another guy. If he would have been on a different team the whole time they brought him in, people would feel different about it because it's the new shiny thing. But they've brought back players who are good and are going to help them in 2026. So for me, it's been a good offseason, but it's not finished yet, and they shouldn't be finished either.
Dan, I think Clay called me out for being critical of Riley Green. It sounds like for during the playoff run and stuff. But no, I'm kidding. But what does the Kenley Jansen signing signal to you then? So talking back, back to the question, are they all in going for it, or is it still a year or two away? What did that say to you?
Yeah, and the Jansen signing is one that I was thinking about it nonstop yesterday because I just couldn't decide how to feel. And I ended up writing about it at 3 a.m. last night because I couldn't sleep. And I was like, what am I going to do? Well, I'm just going to write about Kenley Jansen as any normal human would do. And I keep going back and forth. The downside is his stuff took a tick down last year.
Right.
He wasn't getting nearly the swing and miss. He still lives in the zone quite a bit. Like the most pitches that he threw in the zone, if you were to break it up in quadrants of the zone, the most that landed in the zone were exactly middle. All the pitches in the zone last year, the most were middle. And he gave up a lot of hard contact. I'm a little concerned about 38-year-old coming in and hoping that Father Time doesn't show up this year. However, on the flip side, you brought in a vet of 16 years with one of the best track records that we've seen in baseball over that span. Tons of experience, World Series. There is clubhouse value in this signing. I still think he can be effective. I think his name carries more weight than his value right now. But he doesn't have to be the closer, and that's the beauty of it. He's not the one signing. We need a closer. Here's the one signing, 38-year-old Kenley Jansen. Please save us. It's Vest is still there. It's Kyle Finnegan's brought back. So now you have 3 leverage arms. And that's why I ended up saying overall, I like the deal. I don't love it. I don't think it's going to be amazing. But overall, I think that it can work. And I like that they now have 3 guys who are leverage arms. And to me, that's a really good spot to be on, December 14th.
You mentioned Torres and McGonigal earlier. Torres accepting the qualifying offer and coming back for 1 year, $22 million. Where do you think that puts Kevin McGonigal? Because he's been kind of slated as potentially coming up and being the future second baseman. He's played shortstop. He played a little bit of third in the summer league as well. But where do you think McGonigal lands? Do you think there's an opportunity where he can make this roster opening day, or do you think it's going to be more towards maybe August, September?
I think that there is an opportunity, and it's at shortstop. I know that the long-term outlook and what everyone reads on Twitter, I don't know how this kind of caught fire and just took off, but the idea is this guy cannot play shortstop. It's kind of what the, surrounding him, what it sounds like. That's just not true. It wouldn't be phenomenal shortstop play, and it would be a downgrade from Hobby defensively. But at some point, if you want to get your best roster together and the best lineup, I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, well, the slight down or, the downtick in defense at shortstop's not worth having Kevin McGonigal in the lineup. I think you stomach it. If it's for 1 year, then he moves to second, fine. Whatever it takes to make the best offense right now, because I'm willing to play him at short defensively, even though it's not as good. I think it's going to be worth it for the bat. Third base, you could play him there. I would just rather play him at short for a 21-year-old kid that's coming up. Hey, just play the position that you've been playing your whole life. Just focus on your bat. Come up here, just simplify things. I don't love the idea of bringing up a rookie, changing his position, moving him around. I wanted to make it as simple as him to come to the ballpark, and just focus on being the best player he can be without learning X, Y, and Z. And how do I do my footwork at third base? Is this angle right on the throw? Well, let me play second today. Like, I don't like that. So play him at short. That would make Javi and McKinstry utility players, which would make their bench very good. You can have Javi platoon or Matt Vierling platoon and center with Parker Meadows. Great insurance if that doesn't work out as well. Javi and McKinstry can both play third as well. If you want to do some type of a platoon with Keith, there's late game scenarios where they could all come in for defensive replacements, pinch hitting. Like, it gives you more options and makes your team more multiple, which is kind of what I want. And at that point, McGonagall's at short, Torres at second, Keith, Vierling, free agent signing, McKinstry, Baez, like third base, you could figure something out. I'd rather them address that as well and just be, all set. But
Yeah.
I think that McGonagall should not, I don't think the Torres signing affects him in any way.
You mentioned not wanting to bring a guy up and kind of bouncing him around different positions. First thing that comes to mind is Cole Keith, because it felt like last season that's exactly what happened to him, because he came up as a third baseman, had a shoulder injury. They ended up bringing him up as a second baseman, and then they decide, well, we're going to move him to first because they signed Gleyber Torres. Plays mostly spring training at first, but then Torkelson has this amazing spring training.
Mm.
So then Torkelson takes first base, and now you're bouncing Keith all around. Torres got hurt for a little bit, so he goes back to second. He's playing a little bit first. They're trying to move him back to third. We originally thought maybe he wouldn't be playing third anymore. So he just constantly was bounced around, and it felt like he never really was comfortable last season. And he is a guy that he's one of the few that they've signed long-term. They signed him long-term before he ever made his major league debut, but it feels like we're still kind of waiting for him to really break through and us to see, everything that he can bring to the table. What are your thoughts on Cole Keith?
Yeah, I'm actually working on an article today about him and how I think the narrative's kind of gone too far in the direction of being upset with him. Still a young player, and I know that we all expected, here's the first move of the new era Tigers, Cole Keith, he signed, this guy's going to be the next great thing. And it hasn't quite looked the way that we expected it to. We thought there'd be more power. We thought that there'd be, gap power and doubles and extra base hits. We haven't gotten there yet. He still made big strides last year. I mean, he came in, I think he had a 746 OPS last year, well above league average. He's still a solid player. And I think that they need to start kind of letting him go a little bit. Let him hit against lefties more often. Give him a little bit more freedom and let him figure it out. Another thing working against him has been the cold streaks. Rather it be starting off really cold to begin the year or what, and it kind of flips this narrative of this guy's not playing well. He's drawing walks. He's still hitting the ball pretty well. I still think that there is a path where he is a legit impact bat for the Tigers. It's the other stuff that has kind of clouded his whole scenario. Not a great defender. Where is he playing? He hasn't hit for power. I think that he's still a useful player. And let's just say the Tigers have him batting, in the bottom third of the order. He's better than most bottom of the third order bats in baseball. He still makes the lineup. He lengthens the lineup. And there's that upside where he can improve. He has shown improvement from 24 to 25. Now let's see what it looks like in 26. Oftentimes in sports, that third year is kind of where you see players kind of set what there will be going forward, whether it be taking a jump up with the experience and what they've learned or kind of leveling off and you kind of know what to expect going forward.
So let's say with him, he does take another step, right? Hitting wise, whether it be improved OPS or batting average or whatnot. Position wise, is he too young to still look at as a full-time DH then, right? If there's still not a spot for him, or what do you think they're thinking is there?
That is where it gets really funky. And if you looked at the metrics of him and his smaller sample size at third base last year, it wasn't great. It was, I believe, a -3 outs above average. But kind of what's behind that is, and I know this is getting kind of in the weeds here, so I won't.
We love it.
I won't drag it out too.
No, we love it.
So what's behind that is what's called success rate. So it's expected success rate. And usually over a full year sample size, you'll be in the 70s, mid 70s, is kind of what levels out. He was at 64 expected success rate last year, which means the balls hit to him were not exactly expected at the same rate to be plays that he should make. So it's kind of like, okay, the sample size wasn't large enough to really have this all level out. Could he have been better if he had more sample? Because the plays that were hit to him were difficult plays to begin with. I've watched him at third a lot throughout the minors. I did not think that was his position. I also didn't think second was his position, which is a little bit of where we are now. What the hell do you do with him? First base DH is probably where he is best suited. But at the end of the day, how many of those guys do we have on the roster and or coming up through the system? Something has to get. Now, the good thing is we see players. If you go through and look at most players, you will see improvement in a year at defense. Like that is not unusual. Like you see players come back 1 year to the next and they can be much better. Off-season training, knowing the position, like I said with McGonigal is important. Let's say, hey, Colt Keith, and I don't know this, I'm not saying this should be the Colt Keith, you were the third baseman this year. After they said that about him being first last year and didn't end up being the case. But if he has all off season to work on that, like he can improve to a point that you're satisfied with him at third defensively. I don't think he's going to be a great defender, but let's say he's a third baseman. Javi and McKinstry are on the bench. Like you still have options that are good defensive players that can play third if need be. If you're in a late close game, you want to make a defensive replacement. Like I don't think it's going to be so detrimental that it cannot bring value. Long term, I have no idea what they're going to do with him in terms of a defensive home. I don't think it would be a left field or something along those lines, but if it ends up being a platoon DH, like ugh, that's not what you want. Which is why I think they also need to kind of lean him into a position, which could happen. I mean, if it's opening day and Colt Keith's your third baseman and that's kind of the plan, like, would you be surprised? I don't think I'd be surprised by that at all.
We talked about, maybe going out and getting a bat to add to this middle of the lineup. What do you think if they do go out and add a bat? What do you think is some realistic names? Is it realistic that they could go out and get a Bregman or Bichette, or is it, maybe somebody a little less expensive and maybe a little less long term?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not realistic. I mean, we've seen them tied to some big names, and that doesn't just come out of nowhere. That's not just made up reports where they throw a name in. Like you don't do that as a reporter. You can't. Does that mean that they're the front runners or the most likely to pony up the money? Let's be honest. Like when have the Tigers really shown that they're going to win a bidding? Until we see it, I'm not going to count on it. I don't think it's impossible that a Bregman market slows or, insert player's name slows. It's not where it is. And they sign with the Tigers. Like, did we not just see that with Gleyber Torres to an extent? Not quite the same power, name recognition and whatnot. But I think that they're going to be opportunistic in that regard. I think one name that I think just makes a lot of sense. It's not a middle of the order bat, but it's Ha-Seong Kim, who ended up with the Rays last year and then was injured, missed a lot of the season, ended up in Atlanta, and is now a free agent. Like, it's not the most exciting name, but that's the type of player that makes your team better all around. He can play second, short, third, great defender, good base runner, a good hitter, not like great. He's not going to light it up, but he's a high floor player that I think would help you win. It would lengthen the lineup. And I think the Tigers' approach is probably going to be more towards how many really solid to good players can we get in instead of can we make that one big splash and get the Bregman and, maybe suffer elsewhere. I'm not certain on that. I'm not like super strong on that take, but just knowing how risk adverse Scott Harris has been, I could see him leaning towards how many good players can we get on this roster and just make the depth great, make everyone, each position's at least solid, high floor, and hope for some players playing up, hope for the Riley Green to not swing and miss as much as he did. That ended up like at one point during last year, I was like, he's fine. And then by the end of last year, I was starting to lean towards you all. I was like, oh, okay, this is getting out of hand. Like, you got to be better. Like, the uppercut swing, I think got worse and worse. And it's just like, holy crap. But not to go on a Riley Green tangent or anything, but
we do.
The next time we have you on, that's what it'll be about, the Riley Green range.
Yeah, it really is. Like, at one point, it's like, okay, like there's plenty of profiles like his that end up being successful. And if he is that, that's okay.
Yeah.
And then it kept getting uglier and uglier. And I was like, oh man, I'm turning. And I'm one of those people, I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. Like, we're all wrong all the time. When my job is to more or less have takes left and write them down for the internet to hold against me forever, like I'm going to be wrong. So hopefully that one corrects this year, but we'll see. He's still a useful player, and I still think that he has one of, if not the highest ceilings on the team. But I think that's what Scott Harris counts on. Is the best players on his team taking a step forward, the young guys taking a step forward, and fill out the rest with high floor players who at least give you a good chance of winning. Not exactly the path I would go down, but so be it.
Well, Clay, this has been awesome, man. We really appreciate you having you on. We have incredible insights. This has been a lot of fun. I'm going to leave you with one last question before we let you go. I want your prediction. What is going to happen with Tarik Skubal?
No one's actually asked me this yet, and I've kind of avoided it for the most part. Even in the article I wrote about it. Yeah, in the article I wrote about him, I did like what it looks like if they trade him, what it looks like if he doesn't get traded, because mostly I was like, I don't want to pick a side. And I ended up landing on, I don't think that he's traded, simply because the value of what they get back compared to the value of having him. Now, this assumes that there's more additions, I should say. Having him, getting the comp pick, like the comp pick is not nothing. There's some value there, but
McGonagall was a comp pick.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like there is a lot more value than people give it credit. I don't like to lose him for nothing. To give you the simplest answer, though, if I had to predict what happens, I do think he gets traded. I just think at the end of the day, the Tigers are operating in this world where they haven't shown to be aggressive enough to hold on to him. I think that it is an aggressive move. It sounds weird to say keeping your players is aggressive, but when you have teams of need and here's a prospect package and 6 years of control of these 3-4 players, that Scott Harris may not be able to turn that down. I just don't think he is. So for me, if I had to predict, I would say that he gets traded. I wouldn't, though. I would keep him.
Yeah, Clay, we've been right on board with that same opinion since the beginning. We don't think they should trade him, but we both think that Scott Harris is going to make that move, unfortunately. We all hope it doesn't happen, but it just feels the way things have been operating, it feels like that's where it's headed.
If you're going to be a draft and develop, like, we're so good at this is all the reason. If that's your motto, then like you should not be afraid of keeping him. Because if that's where all your value is and that's where you're best, then why can't you draft and develop more pitchers to help fill this out? Like, that's my whole thing. The teams that are so draft developed, we're going to build from within. Like, I want to see them keep some of these players, get the QO, like, try. Quit trying to make all the stars align and trading and bringing in, like, keep the best pitcher in baseball when you have a chance for a playoff run.
Oh, and really quick, like my point about the Kenley Jansen signing, to me, that almost makes me feel now I'm pulling back a little bit. I don't know if he's traded, because why even bother helping the back end of your bullpen to that degree if they're not going to go for it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Keep him, man. I swear, no. I don't know. If I look back five years from now and it's, man, remember the 2026 season when like we really did have a chance and they went for it? Like, oh yeah, they lost Skubal, and like, oh yeah, we didn't get River Ryan. Like, shoot, like I think we would all be in the future, like look back and be like okay with it, because he's going to get the most massive deal that is way too risky to give starting pitchers to begin with.
Right.
So in the future, put yourself 5 years from now and look back. Yeah, they lost Skubal, but man, they went for it, and it was something that you can respect.
Yes.
Again,
thanks, Clay, for coming on. Where can people follow you online and Twitter and at Just Baseball?
Yeah, and thanks you all for inviting me. I love to talk baseball anytime. My Twitter handle, I actually don't know it off the top of my head. That's probably not good. At Clay_Snowden2, and justbaseball.com is where you can find all of my written work. And there's a ton of prospect stuff over there as well. If you haven't checked out Just Baseball, it's a great website with a ton of information. And check it out.
Awesome, Clay. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to talking to you again down the road, maybe once we get closer to the season.
Yeah, appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Clay.
Yeah, too.
Thanks, man.
Well, there it is, Brian. Quite the conversation, man. That guy knows his stuff. There's no doubt about it. What are your general thoughts after that interview?
Well, I thought it was funny when he said, I don't know what phrase he used, but he didn't want to go down the rabbit hole or how crazy. And we're like, heck no, man. Like, we want to hear that stuff. We love that stuff. This is great. Probably along the lines of, like we said, like what we've been talking about. Just there's still a lot of uncertainty. Like I still think there's like they can't be done with their roster construction now. Like I think it's obvious still they're not done into February, because unless they're going into the season and you're assuming like, because last year, what I brought up was the position situations and how they're going to handle Colt Keith and Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling now if he's healthy for a full year, and Meadows healthy for a full year, right? Like where all those guys going to play? I didn't mention Wencel Perez. He's starting AAA, right? Well, he had the biggest hit of the playoffs or the series against Cleveland in Game 3. You know what I'm saying? To extend their lead in the 8th inning. Like, so I just think there's a lot of questions still. But it was interesting to hear his take on Tarik Skubal and how he kind of thinks like us a little bit in that regard. I
was almost disappointed to hear that.
I know.
Like, you don't want it. You don't want it to happen. They're so close. They're so close. Just go for it. Yeah.
I didn't. I was curious, and he made the point though. Like I thought it was cool what he said about how Scott Harris, the phrase he used was risk averse so far, and I think that's very true and apparent, right? Like last year at the deadline, people were upset, but he didn't include any of his prospects, not just his top guys, but like some of his significant guys, right? In any type of trade. So being risk averse makes a lot of sense. But I still wonder now if they are going to trade Tarik Skubal, like to his point, are they still a World Series contender? And I think like we said, it depends on the return, right? And I know he mentioned a lot of top end prospects, but he also mentioned if you can get a couple guys who might not be that high end superstar, but they're still going to make your team better. Like who's to say they're not?
The guy that's been added into some of those rumors is Tyler Glasnow. He's got the high end ability. He's the top of the rotation guy. The problem is he's always hurt.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's still like, who knows? And the crazy thing about baseball is like, okay, let's say, again, nobody thought a couple years ago. Okay, people thought a couple years ago when there were sellers at the deadline, their season was done and they go on the run, right? I'm sure people will say now if we trade Skubal, like, no, zero shot, this team's going anywhere. But then they're playing really well and they're in first place or close to it at the trade deadline. Like, who's to say then it's not going to be, okay, we're going for it. You know what I'm saying? So, again, fascinating. We go back to that word a lot with the Tigers right now. Fascinating. It's a great time to be a Tiger fan that we're even having these conversations instead of, looking forward to another 100-loss season. Now we're counting on the days of spring training because there's a lot to look forward to.
Well, risk adverse, it could just be the title of Detroit sports. I mean,
it could be
the Lions that never seem to make that big move to get the defensive end on the other side of Hutch. The Red Wings don't make the big move at the deadline to try to push them over the hump to end this playoff drought.
Minnesota Wild acquired Hughes the other night. Like the Red Wings were tied to him. Like, yeah.
Well, we can actually go ahead and get our next guest. Perfect timing, right?
This is great.
Here we go. We welcome from Woodward Sports, a Detroit sports OG, an absolute legend in Detroit sports media, one of my all-time favorites, It's Sean Baligian. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Oh, that's too kind. Thank you very much, Dan. Really appreciate it. Coach, always nice to see you. How are you guys doing?
We're likewise, sir. We're doing well. We're doing well. Fired up in this frigid north of December in Michigan, man. But get to talk with you, so it's a good day, my friend.
Yeah, no doubt. Big game this afternoon. Can't wait for it.
Absolutely. But before we get into the game, Sean, some wild news this week. One of the wilder weeks, I think, in Detroit sports media that we can remember in a long time. And that's what I want to kind of start with, Sean. You know, everything that's gone on with Sherrone Moore this week, like, where does this rank in terms of stories that you've covered throughout your career?
It's up there with anything. The surreal picture of him sitting in that arraignment, that it got me. It's fun. There it is. I just, is this real? You know, I mean, literally 24 hours beforehand, he's thinking about a big bowl game and you know, all these, you know, incredible things. And, you know, the class that he just brought in and to that, it's remarkable. You know, Dan, you and I kind of exchanged some notes. Things were out there. There were things that were out there. As you well know, Lord knows there have been so many unsubstantiated rumors over the years and everything. And there was no, you know, confirmation of some of the stuff that was going on. But once it started to come out, boy, it just rained. It's just an incredible, surreal couple of days. No doubt about that.
You mentioned, you mentioned the class they just brought in and they just signed, and then just this all comes out just a day or two later. And like, that bothers me a lot in that, right? Like, if more than one person knew about this, like, you have to assume like the rest of the coaching staff probably knew about it, unfortunately, right? And like, I know there's shadiness and stuff going on at the college level everywhere, regardless, that goes on. But like, gosh, so like, you're recruiting those kids and you're telling them, hey man, we want you here for the next 4 years or whatever it may be, knowing this stuff's going on. Like, that just sits sour with me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm surprised not more kids have already said, hey, like, we're looking elsewhere. I know there's been a couple, right? But I'm surprised there hasn't been more, or all of them saying like, hey man, like, no, we're bailing. Because that just is awful on so many levels, in my opinion.
It was really interesting because, like, we talked about it on the entities that I work with. And the one thing that I said about the unsubstantiated rumors at the time is I said, I'm not going to lend credence to it to talk about that. But outside of that, there were a lot of rumors that he was in trouble. There was speculation that there were players only meetings and then a couple coaches showed up, and there's been the speculation that he hadn't talked to his defensive coordinator since the USC game. So there was a lot of stuff out there. And it's one of those, you got to go with what you heard type of things. I had a guy tell me point blank that he thought that he might be done when the signing period was over. And when I heard that, I had the exact same reaction that you did. Now, wait a second. We're going to wait until everything's signed, sealed, and delivered. And then boom, we're going to go in a different direction. But yeah, he didn't have a lot of friends. And it's amazing how that always works itself out after the fact. It didn't seem like he had a lot of friends in the athletic department, even before we found out this just crazy information and unfortunate situation. And I always say the same thing. I'm a parent. For this to happen to those poor kids, they don't have anything to do with that. That's the stuff that breaks my heart. And if you want to call me a daisy or whatever for saying that, then so be it. I'm a pretty daisy, because you're talking about little kids just a couple weeks before Christmas, and it just breaks your heart. It really does.
Yeah.
Where do you think this puts Ward Manuel, athletic director for Michigan? I mean, just scandal after scandal after scandal, but he still stays around, man. You got to believe that seat is red hot right now.
You would think so, but you take a look at some of the things going on in the athletic department. Obviously, they print money. I mean, that's the name of the game. They print money. The hockey team is tremendous. The basketball team is tremendous. So, maybe that's it, but yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that he's Teflon, and right now, I would have to agree with that because it has been scandal after scandal after scandal in varying degree and everything. But I don't know, guys. I mean, here we are Sunday, December 14th. And if nothing's happened by far, I don't think it's going to happen. I really, truly don't. I don't think it's going to happen.
With that, I mean, obviously they're in a coaching search now. I would think he's running it, even if his seat is red hot. Where do you think they're looking? Obviously, some names have popped up, but where do you think they're headed? And what are some names that you think they should go for?
I'm really intrigued at the whole Kalen DeBoer thing. And I know what people are thinking, well, wait a second, Alabama's playing in a playoff and they're focused on that. Yeah. But, I mean, I think you guys have read the tea leaves. It's always difficult to be the guy who replaces the guy. It just is. And that's an unenviable position. No doubt about that. If they lose to Oklahoma, does that mean that he becomes available? And first and foremost, is Kalen DeBoer at or near the top of their list? And I think the answer to the latter is yes. And again, this is just speculation. And, you might know this person or you might know that person, but that's a name that keeps coming up. I even heard somebody say yesterday that they think that there's an offer in place and a really big offer at that, depending on what transpires after that game against Oklahoma. But, again, I don't know. I think that would be a good fit. This is a guy with a good reputation. I'm not so sure he's ever going to make it work in Alabama. I'm serious. That's a different place, man. It just is. So that's the way that it goes. But you can say what you want about what this does to Michigan's brand. You can say that it's bruised. You can say that it'll never be the same. It's still Michigan. That's the reality of it, guys. I don't care if you're the biggest Michigan fan or you're the biggest Spartan or biggest Buckeye. That brand means something. And I don't think there's a coach in the country that wouldn't be interested in going to a place like that with the resources as well at their disposal. So, short of saying they've got the pick of the litter, because I'm not so sure. I heard somebody say Lane Kiffin, and it's like, oh, goodness gracious. You roll your eyes after everything that just happened. But they're going to have their pick of almost the litter. I'm convinced of it.
I'm not sure people remember this or realize it, but Kalen DeBoer knows the Ann Arbor area. Like, he was the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach at EMU for 2 years, right? So, I mean, he knows a little bit about this. And I've said for a while, like, I think it has to be a guy that has an offensive track record and somebody who's been good with quarterbacks before. But I would hope for their sake they get somebody in place as soon as possible, because now they're going through those bowl practices, right? And the worst thing that I think could happen is after this bowl game, they bring somebody on and the scheme is completely different than what he's been doing, right? And right now, like, people talk about the importance of bowl practices, and they're a big deal in his development. Again, he's 18, 19 years old, right? For Bryce Underwood, we're talking about. So to me, it has to stop, right? Hard stop. Like, it's got to be somebody with an offensive background or has ties to somebody that can come in and work really well with quarterbacks. Especially with the way the season ended for Bryce Underwood. Like, I still think he's an extremely physically talented dude, right? But obviously there needs to be some more growth for him going into the next season or into the spring.
I think that was the biggest problem that I had this year in doing the jobs that I do and talking to some of the Michigan fans that I do is I think they were victims of their own expectations. He was a true freshman. Okay. Trevor Lawrence's don't grow on trees. Okay. It just doesn't work that way. And I felt with their schedule, I'll be honest with you guys. If I were Michigan, I would have taken Oklahoma off the schedule and fired Northern Illinois on there. And, you do something like that, and maybe, just maybe, they're a playoff team right now. I mean, that's how crazy the dynamic is. But with that being said, Coach, I agree with you 100%. I got a chance to see this kid more than a few times playing in the great high school ranks in this state. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in his talent. Now you have to put him in those positions of comfortability.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think that maybe this season the coaching maybe had failed him a little bit? And when you look at everything that was going on with Sherrone Moore, maybe that he wasn't developed in the proper way. And Brian and I talked a lot about this after the Ohio State game, and I talked about this all year. I thought he should have been more involved in the run game a lot more. And I remember listening to David Pollock's podcast going into the game, and he said that most times any designed runs for him, the most in the game were 3. And I'm like, is a quarterback with that athletic ability and maybe his passing game isn't as developed as you would like it to be, and you would expect that as a true freshman, well, run him. Utilize his athletic ability and design runs for him. And it just didn't seem like they did that enough throughout the year. And I'm curious about your opinion on just his overall development through the year. And did you notice, as much as Brian and I did, like in that Ohio State game, like he just seemed really, really uncomfortable?
You know what? To me, guys, and I'm serious when I say this. I'm not just saying that this because Coach Barnes is here. I had a real eye opener when I was working down in Toledo. I got a chance to sit in on a film session with Coach Pinkel. Okay, and I'm a big fan of Gary Pinkel. Yeah. And the thing that blew my mind is you think you know football. We don't know a darn thing. Yeah. Those guys are thinking on different levels, man. They're just in a different world than us. And I am so serious when I say that. But the one thing that I saw during the year, and I think it goes hand in hand with what you were saying, Michigan just looked off all year to me. It didn't look like Michigan. And I'm not trying to be that guy and say I'm the smartest guy in the room and I know more than they do. I'm admitting how short I am in that regard. But I think, you know what Michigan wants to do. You know how they want to do it. They looked off all year. And I think it was part of a bigger problem. Now, I know it's easy to throw shade at the offensive coordinator. I know it's easy to throw shade at Wink, but I think it starts at the top. And I think the 2 years of Sherrone Moore, they just didn't look like Michigan. And I, in my humble opinion, and I'm not a Michigan fan, but I don't think it evoked a lot of confidence either. And if I can see that at home, and some of these kids can play like that, I think there's more validity to that kind of talk than anybody wants to lend credence to, Dan.
And well, to that point, Dan and I talked about this. Like, okay, granted, when Sherrone Moore took over, like, yeah, the cupboard wasn't exactly bare. I mean, obviously they lost some guys, right? But the cupboard is never bare at Michigan, right? And then you would go into this new 12-team playoff, and Michigan didn't make it one time those 2 years, right? I mean, which is like, even with that step back, that's still kind of surprising if you're Michigan and you're still right. You're at that elite level, and to your point, they weren't.
Yeah. You saw it all year. I mean, it was to me, it was very obvious and everything. And but at the end of the day, I know, and this always happens, when a coach leaves anyway. Now you start to hear this stuff. Well, we weren't on the same page. Well, these guys didn't like him. Well, these guys were frustrated. I don't know the truth. I know last week I heard what I heard, and there were some players' meetings, and there was some, discontent, so to speak. But I think a lot of times the eye test kind of shows things. And this didn't look like a great football team in any way, shape, or form this season. They really didn't.
Well, to shift gears a little bit and go to the team that's on your hat there, Michigan State. And they were the team that had to go through some chaos after that Mel Tarker situation. And Jonathan Smith just wasn't quite the right fit there. Kind of obvious that they had to move on. But they bring in Pat Fitzgerald. And it just feels like, man, there's an energy, there's an excitement that hasn't been there for a minute at Michigan State. Well, what are your thoughts on that hire of Pat Fitzgerald at Michigan State?
I like it a lot, and I like it because of the chip on the shoulder aspect of it. I think the Spartans need to get that chip on the shoulder back. And, I always tell people, I mean, everybody puts Mark D'Antonio on a pedestal now, and as well they should, when you look at his track record. People weren't exactly having parades when they hired that guy from Cincinnati. I remember it. I'll call myself out. It was kind of like, and then you saw pretty early on, you saw it manifest itself sooner rather than later. And for those of us that remember the speech, the pride comes before the fall speech. And we were like, whoa. And then he made it happen, And obviously, you think about a co-championship, divisional championships. 2 Big Ten championship, 3 years, top 5 teams and everything. There's a lot of work to get there. And that Mark D'Antonio found that out. He took his lumps, make no mistake about it. And even after you thought they arrived, you have the 2010 season where you're co-champions. You have the 2011 season where, you win the division. You're thinking onward and upward, and then it goes like this in 2012. And I think that's part of the thing. One of the things that I've learned, I guess, in being in this business is, we're all so consumed by linear. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't, just because the Lions went to the NFC Championship doesn't mean, well, by golly, that means they're taking the next step that year. It doesn't work that way. And but getting back to the point at hand, I like it from the attitude standpoint. I really do. This is a guy that personally has a chip on his shoulder. This is a guy that I think it's well known. He doesn't like Michigan, and that counts for something. That does. And this is a guy that, with limited resources, had some pretty good teams at Northwestern. Were they great teams? No, but he found a way to mix in some double-digit seasons. He did have some stinkers where they went down, but you would like to think at a place like Michigan State that there are a lot of resources there. You would like to think that perhaps he could find some more stability, but there's a lot of work to be done over the stink. There's no other way to say it, that has kind of emanated from Michigan State the last couple of years in regards to the football program.
What I think this does, though, is like from a symbolic perspective too, right? They just got the $401 million donation from the Dawson family or Williams family, excuse me, right? And Pat Fitzgerald. And because Dan and I have talked about where we are with college football right now, in my opinion, it's like if you're either all in or you might as well not even bother. Right. Yeah. If you're not all in going for it financially and everything, right, it's no bother. So to me, that's telling everybody like, hey, man, like they're legit. Like, no, they're buying in, like they're going for it. And that's, to me, the symbolism of it is crucial to the fan base who, like you said, the last couple of years, it's been like, oh, like, what are we doing? All right, teetering, right? What are we doing? So
yeah, I still can't believe, guys. I mean, my daughter's a junior at Michigan State now. And, I told her when she started, I was like, honey, wherever the bowl game is, that's our trip. We're going to take a trip. I promise you we'll make a family. We haven't been able to go yet, right? Yeah. It's like, come on, you can't even make a bowl game. And, I don't care if I'm pouring mayo all over myself or I'm coming out of a toaster like a Pop-Tart. I want to take my kid to a bowl game while she's there.
That's funny. Well, my daughter is at Lake Superior State, actually, so I don't get to go to a bowl game. I get to go to a hockey game up there, which is pretty awesome as well. So, but yeah, that's awesome.
Just to finish up though, Sean, with the Michigan State talk, like what is your confidence level on if and when they can kind of get back to being a consistent top 20 program?
I would love to believe. I think, especially the way that schedules are now, I would love to believe that maybe they could get back to a bowl game next year. Mm-hmm. Even if it's 6-6, and I'll go to the Pinstripe Bowl, I'll go to the Mayo Bowl, whatever the case may be. Top 20, boy, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think, what Pat Fitzgerald has to do is go about doing what Mark D'Antonio did oh so well and finding those guys that were maybe overlooked by Ohio State, overlooked by Michigan, those chip on the shoulder guys, the 3s that turn into 4s, the 4s that maybe turn into 5s and things like that. And that was something that, in the prime D'Antonio era, that's what you did. You look at those teams in 13, 14, and 15. They weren't chock full of, blue chip 5-star guys or anything. They were stock full of guys that fit exactly what he wanted to do. So I think Fitz has that, like Coach Barnes said, I think Fitz has that mentality of, I know what I want to do. Now I've got to get the pieces in place.
Do you get the sense, you might not know this answer, but do you get the sense that Pat Fitzgerald is a big transfer portal guy? Like I'm curious to see what's going to happen with that window coming up in January.
That's a great, I don't know, that's, he's kind of before that started,
right.
Right. So that's a great question. Isn't it amazing? I mean, some of the things that we talk about now, right. I made the comment to somebody, I love college football. I love it. I love it. I'm one of the coolest things that ever happened to me was to be named a Heisman voter. Okay. But I always make this comment. I was talking to Matt Shepard about this. I love college football on Saturday morning to Saturday night. The rest of the week, I just shake my head at what it's become, okay? But, boy, I tell you what, for pomp and pageantry, and yes, even game day, boy, on Saturday, I'm all in. I'm a college football fan.
Well, I bring up the aspect of like how quickly could they get to a top 20 program, because the fact that every new coach that takes on a program is going to face this, and that's the Kurt Signetti factor.
Oh, yeah.
What he was able to do at Indiana, and as quickly as he was able to do it, utilizing the transfer portal at a place like Indiana, and him able to do it that quickly. And I always talk about Michigan State. I mean, it's always going to be a struggle from a recruiting standpoint traditionally, because you have Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State surrounding you. But now in this day and age with NIL, the transfer portal, you look at what the money that is potentially coming into Michigan State from the big rich alums and the excitement level that Pat Fitzgerald's bringing, like maybe there is a possibility they could do this a little bit quicker than traditionally you would see.
And it becomes a destination. I mean, now, like, who wouldn't want to go to Indiana? I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. But this is where we're at. That's the crazy dynamic about it. It's a new world, and it works by different things. But we saw that with Mark Antonio. All of a sudden, 13, 14, 15 happens, and you start seeing some guys that normally wouldn't thought about Michigan State. The level that I feel sorry for, and I brought this up earlier, I was very fortunate to. The Mid-American Conference is nothing but a minor league now. Yeah. If you're a freshman now, and you have some monster season down in Athens, Ohio, somebody's going to give you a call and go, hey, man, what car would you like? And what number can we, just ballpark figure, what number can we start at to get you to come to my place and everything? And that's too bad, because I have a soft spot in my heart for the Mid-American Conference. I think everybody knows there's darn good football that's being played. And heck, I'm fortunate enough to work in D2 and work in the GLIAC now. And you see it happen at Ferris State. I mean, what a machine that Tony has built. And they give Chambliss a call and go, okay, pick a car. We got this warehouse. I want you to pick a car. And then here's a check. You fill out the number and everything. And all of a sudden he finds himself in Oxford, Mississippi. So, it's a whole new world now in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. As Brian and I always like to say when we do our college football retro show, it just used to be better.
I love you. I told you guys, I love that stuff, man. Some of the games you guys have broken down, it really hits for a lot of guys like me, where you're saying, man, I remember sitting in my front room watching that game. I was aghast and things like that. So that's a really cool bit you guys have.
Cool.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Sean. But the next topic we got to get into, and it's the biggest topic of the day, it is Lions-Rams. And Sean, man, what a huge game. It almost feels like the hype for it has been down a little bit just because of the crazy news week that has happened to Detroit sports. But man, what a huge game this is. Lions-Rams today at 4:25. Just what are your initial thoughts, heading into this game?
I actually talked to Dan Miller about this the other day, and it reminds me so much of some of the conversations we were having 10 days ago about the Dallas Cowboys, except it isn't the Dallas Cowboys and it isn't Dak Prescott. But could I order the exact same menu that we had last Thursday? Get that pass rush going. You know what? You want to make amends for maybe what you don't have in your defensive backfield. Get after the quarterback. I mean, that's a fantastic secondary in and of itself when you can get after the quarterback. And we need this offense to be on point. This isn't quite last year, where I'll never forget looking at this graph where it showed all the league's injuries, like about here, and then the Lions were up there. We don't have that magnitude, but where they are, can you overcome these injuries to the defensive backfield? I've got my doubts. I mean, this is a complete makeshift defensive backfield. And let's face it, one of the key pieces, we don't know if he's going to come back this year. There's a something serious going on with his knee right now. So the only way you can overcompensate that is for this defensive line to be dominant. And, I say this all the time and people get angry. I love Aiden Hutchinson. I'm happy he's a Lion. But is there a next level there? Because if there's a next level there, it would be great if it happened right now. You know, that Myles Garrett level, that Micah Parsons level. And I get it. You know, he's double teamed and he's chipped and life's miserable. But if there's that next level, by golly, it'd be great if we saw it today, because you know what Matthew Stafford's doing, it reminds me of the year that Aaron Rodgers had. It was the COVID year where, you know, it's almost like the game slows down. You've been in the game so long and your body's still able to do the things that you know you need to be able to do. Rodgers was tremendous that year. I think his TD to interception ratio was like 48-5. It was like one of those things where you sat at home going, I hate this guy. I hate him so much, but my gosh, is he awesome. And Stafford's kind of having that type of year right now.
Sean, I have a bad feeling about today. I just do. I mean, I know that there's still a path regardless of what happens today, but like you can attest to this better than anybody because you've covered, you know, the league so long. At some point, like these are still human beings, man. Like they keep battling back and like, hey, you know, we have the grit and Dan Campbell and he motivates them and they, you know, hey, we're going to bounce back. We're going to keep getting up. But at some point, you know, you're going to hit that low, man. Right. And I almost feel like the Bills have been kind of like that a little bit this year. Like not that they're down and completely out of it. Right. But the Patriots now zoom by them just like that. Right. Because the Bills have been through so much, it seems like, without breaking through. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's something where they can still, regardless of what happens today, like find a way and grind out these last 4 weeks and get into the playoffs, because we all know anything can happen. And when you have the best player on the field, and I'm back to this, I'm up here. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is now the best player in football. I just do. I just have a bad feeling about, you know, today. And like you said, the matchup especially.
This has been, you know, was it Denny Green that said you are what your record indicates? And I think the Lions are there. And let's face it, guys, it's been over 2 months now. We've been a win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, lose one team. And it is remarkable that they haven't lost back-to-back games in over 3 years. That in the National Football League, that's incredible. But the flip side has been loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. And I think this is what they are right now. I said the same thing, and guys busted on me something fierce, you know, because you know how things are in this town. You're not allowed to be objective. You just have to say, yay, Lions by 21 and everything. I don't like this one at all, especially out there. And you know, it's the same dynamic that's working for them that works for us. How many times have you heard the Lions say before a game, oh, we're not really remembering last year. Oh, last year was last year. And they took it to the Cowboys last year down in Dallas. They remembered the year before and everything. And I think there's a little bit of that going on with Matthew Stafford. He is an uber competitor, and I think he knows the Lions got the better of him the last couple of times they played, especially, you know, that big playoff win and everything. And he's going to be ready to go today.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to bring up, Sean, with the Matthew Stafford narrative. Like, I know for me, I did a football show earlier this week, and I just thought, you know, like, I'm done with all that narrative and all that stuff and Stafford against the Lions and all that. Just win. Like the importance of the game is so much more important than whether they beat Stafford or not. I wonder what you think, and just your feeling with, you know, talking to fans around the state. Like, what is the feeling with Stafford at this point now?
It's really weird. It's the strangest bit to me. I never got into the Detroit Rams thing. I don't get it. No offense to you if you were. I like Matthew. Okay, now he's a quarterback on another team, though. Nothing personal. He's a quarterback on another team, and the constant reliving of the deal is really strange to me, because I don't want to do over. They probably don't want to do over, okay? Yeah. At the end of the day, they won a Super Bowl, so they have the bragging rights right now. But if I could snap my finger right now and say, nah, you know what? Let's just pretend that never happened. I don't want to snap my finger right now. Look at what the Lions got out of that, and pieces that are going to help them, hopefully, remain uber competitive for the foreseeable future. So, I think it's starting to go down. You know, you have the funny part of it, though. Kathy, excuse me, Mrs. Stafford doing the whole "they booed my kids." Kelly Stafford, they booed my kids, which so people have fun with that kind of stuff, I think. But no, I think too many years have passed. I mean, Jared Goff is our quarterback. I think Jared Goff is beloved in this town, and like everybody else, I don't know how a living, breathing organism could say, well, I'd like a do-over. It was one of those deals, and they don't happen often in sports, where you can legitimately look at both sides and say, wow, that was a win-win deal. So it's kind of lost on me. I'm not rooting against the guy. Well, today I am. I'm rooting fierce against the guy. I don't have like bitterness towards the guy or anything. If anything, I think we should all say, hey, thanks for kind of forcing the trade. But I'm with you. I think that's just passed. Enough time has passed.
Yeah, the Kelly Stafford thing, I always found that funny. Oh, they're booing my kids. It's like she couldn't fathom the fact that, no, Kelly, they're booing you. They're booing your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, with the whole, Detroit Rams thing and everything with rooting for Stafford, like for me, like when Verlander got traded, that was a whole different thing because Verlander won big time playoff games, put the Detroit Tigers on his back many a times, went out to Oakland, got 9 innings shutout and took them to the next round of the playoffs. Like so many huge games, took them to the World Series. I know they ultimately didn't win the whole thing, but man, so many playoff memories and playoff wins with Verlander. I rooted for him. I rooted for him winning the Astros. I felt good for him when he won the world title. To me, it was different. It was different with Stafford because he didn't have those. They didn't win a playoff game. And yeah, he played great. There was some great memories, but man, they ultimately really didn't win a whole lot and they didn't win playoff games. And that was the huge difference to me with Verlander and Stafford.
Yeah. One of my biggest chief complaints about Lions fans is I think we've made the mistake of comparing the Lions to the Lions way too often instead of comparing ourselves to the Green Bay Packers and having aspirations like the Packers do, to the Kansas City Chiefs, to the New England Patriots. And how many times would we say, well, Matthew Stafford was the best quarterback we ever saw in our life? Well, that may be true. And I'm not going to argue with that. He's a tremendous talent, but I want more. And you really saw a lot of that during the Coach Caldwell era. There was certainly a great amount of the fan base that wasn't happy that we got rid of him. And then when obviously Matt Patricia came in, it was like, oh, I miss Jim Caldwell. And it was like, no, I don't miss Jim Caldwell. I don't. Just because the next guy wasn't good enough doesn't suddenly make Jim Caldwell good enough. And I think we've all been guilty of that. And I've yearned for the day where a guy like Dan Campbell could come in here and raise the bar. And you know what the bar is right now? It's where it should be. Anything short of playoff success in January and February is a failure. And I love that. I want those expectations. I've been yearning for those expectations. How many times did we just say, well, golly gee, let's just get in? And no. It's time to aim higher. And I think as a fan base, we have collectively.
I think you already touched on it a little bit already, but so what do you think is the Lions' path to victory today?
You have to get after the quarterback. And I'm not saying go have 20 sacks or something like that, but make Matthew's life miserable. I just don't think, I really don't think that you can overcompensate enough for what that defensive backfield is. That's just reality. So I think you're going to have to get after the quarterback. And like I said, it reminds me so much of that Dallas game last week. Okay, guys, we're going to have to keep scoring. And you know what? Maybe if we have the opportunity, maybe we kick that field goal on a 4th and 8 as opposed to going for it and everything. I think points are going to be at a premium. And if they hope to win this game, I would really like the repeat of what we saw against Dallas last week at Ford Field.
Well,
I don't expect it though. I got to be honest with you. I don't expect it.
Yeah. Well, we kind of got where you guys both are leaning, but let's go ahead and get your predictions for this game. Brian, let's start with you.
Gosh, 38-20 Los Angeles, something like that. Maybe I'm not giving the Lions enough credit offensively. Maybe 38-28 then, something like that. But I don't see how the Lions stop them. That's my biggest concern. I don't see how they stop them.
I said the similar 34-24, 38-27, something like. I am not a betting man. I'm not saying that to be PC. Yeah. I am not a betting man. But if I were a betting man, I think I would give the points today.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the same boat with you guys, man. I just don't see them being able to stop Stafford in that passing game with the way they're beat up their secondary is. I think this is going to be a real shootout. I'm saying 41-37 Rams in an absolute like lights out shootout. I think it's going to be a fun one, but I think the Rams are going to get it in the end and just be too much for them. But I think the Lions offenses, man, they've looked great the last couple of weeks, and I think they're going to be able to hold their own. But the Rams are just going to be a little bit too much. And before we let you go, Sean, I want to get both your guys' thoughts. We all feel that the Rams are going to pull this one out, but where do you see the Lions kind of finishing up this season, and do they make the playoffs? Brian, I'll start with you.
Yeah, we talked about it before. I still kind of think they do. I think they win out. I'm looking forward to like after today, a hard reset, and then okay, like let's buckle up, man. 4 weeks to get in, and that Week 18 game is gonna be a lot of fun against Chicago. That's why I look at it.
I feel the exact same way. I think that turns into an elimination game. The Bears' schedule moving forward after the Browns today is not easy. You got Frisco, you got Green Bay, you got Detroit. I think that's an elimination game. I think we eliminate Ben Johnson and the Bears that last week of the year. And, you get into the playoffs and, you pull out every cliche. It's a whole new season. Coach, you mentioned Buffalo. Man, if I had to pick a team right now in the AFC, I'd still pick Buffalo. I mean, even with New England's doing, I'm not going against that madman quarterback. He's so fun to watch, and we'll see what happens. But I think they find a way to creep in as a wild card.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with all you guys. I think they lose today, but I think they win out the rest of the way and get in the playoffs. And man, that last Week 18 game, man, it feels like we're headed towards another Sunday Night Football last game of the year. This time it's a win and get in scenario, and you're going to have all the narratives with Ben Johnson, and Chicago hasn't really made it in a while. If that sets up, man, that's going to be quite the story and quite the build up and a lot of fun.
No doubt about it. Looking forward to it. And I mean, for me, I think it depends what era you grew up in. Like my son hates the Packers, and they were his tormentor. For me, I hated the Bears, and I openly admit I watched Ditka's Bears, and they were everything I wanted to be. So that's where my hate comes from, I mean, and so, for a guy like me and maybe guys in our generation, if you had to pick the team you hate the most, it was like once Ben went to the Bears, it's like, all right, you're the enemy. That's it. Yeah. And I told Joik Bell, I got a chance to call Joik's games in college. Yeah. And when he signed with the Bears, I texted him. I said, okay, you're dead to me until you're not a Bear any longer. And he's like, don't do me like that. And I was like, no, that's the way it is, man. Like you're dead to me. That's the fun of it. And, we'll see. That'd be a pretty cool thing though, the last week of the year.
That's hilarious. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining us, man. This has been a lot of fun. Where can people find you?
No, you know what? Having some fun doing some things on my own out of the basement. It's pretty cool. And, doing some stuff with Woodward Sports. And I love what I do for state champs. I've had more fun doing that stuff than you can shake a stick at. It really is a blast, and what a great crew there. So very, very fortunate. I don't know how I've been able to do this for over 30 years now, but what a blessing it's been.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, man. This has been great. Thank you.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you guys. All the best to you guys this holiday season and your families.
Appreciate it. Likewise.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sean.
For
Sean Baligian, for Coach Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy. This has been Inside the Coach's Office. We'll see you again down the road.